outside China and their families, friends and supporters from around the world. On behalf of the organizers, welcome to the 5th China Human Rights Lawyers Day and the 6th anniversary of 709 crackdown. I'm Yaxue. I will moderate today's event. The presence of parliamentarians, scholars, and the representatives of international lawyers organizations in today's event demonstrates a heightened awareness of the perilous situation of human rights lawyers in China and the unprecedented solidarity with them. However, absent from today's event is the greatest champion of human rights lawyers in China for 2 decades, the Hong Kong lawyer, Mr. Albert Ho. As you all probably know already, he's in jail in Hong Kong. So the tragedy is quickly unfolding, the same tragedy quickly unfolding in Hong Kong. So feeling sad and angry is not enough. We must carry on. The organizers see today's event at the beginning of all of us working together with a renewed sense of urgency and involvement to speak out for and support human rights lawyers in China. We have a rich and edifying program today, and without further ado, we shall begin. We learned yesterday that Baroness Helena Kennedy is having a throat infection and cannot be with us in the room today, but she sent a video address. She's a British lawyer, a member of the House of Lords, Director of the International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute. We will start with her opening remarks.
It's my great privilege to join you today. I'm sorry I'm not with you, if you like, live for the event. I have, unfortunately, a throat infection. But I did want to send a message of solidarity to Chinese lawyers. And I wanted to encourage everyone who's a lawyer in other parts of the world to recognize the importance of standing alongside our colleagues in the law who take such brave positions in China. Now, my name is Helena Kennedy, and I am the director of the International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute. The persecution of lawyers is unfortunately a common theme across the overt and indeed even in covert authoritarian regimes operating around the world, with the rule of law and its enforcement being the foremost universal check and balance mechanism to ensure the accountability of governments. Understanding the motivations behind the repressive treatment of lawyers is not difficult. Repressive governments go after them because it's lawyers who expose authoritarian regimes and their practices against the citizens of a nation. If the rule of law is the heart of the legal system, lawyers are its limbs. And thus the targeted subjugation of lawyers is of particular concern in the East Asian regions of China and Hong Kong. The increasingly cataclysmic atmosphere China has fostered in Hong Kong is rendered all the more concerning by the pattern of persecution of Chinese lawyers undertaking their professional duties, both in Hong Kong and in mainland China. The 9th of July marks the 6th anniversary of the 709 crackdown, a state-sponsored campaign devised to persecute Chinese human rights lawyers and other advocates, during which over 200 lawyers were detained, were tortured, arrested, and forcibly disappeared. The offensive was orchestrated to essentially intimidate an entire generation of lawyers into silent submission. 6 years on, the landscape for lawyers practicing in China, namely for human rights lawyers, remains hostile, dangerous, and wholly repressive. As of late 2019, the political prisoner database of the Congressional Executive Commission of China recorded 1,598 cases of political prisoners, although they have noted that the true figure is considerably higher. Of those 1,598 prisoners, over 100 are lawyers. Prior to and since this last documenting period, there have been numerous reports of lawyers being detained under baseless and vague charges, such as inciting subversion of state power. These lawyers are then remanded in custody for oftentimes monstrously long periods of duration. One such illustration of the systemic abuse of lawyers and their rights by Chinese authorities is the case of the human rights lawyer Bo-Hsiang. Bo-Hsiang, after having been arrested in 2018, was held in pre-trial detention for over 500 days for allegedly inciting subversion of state power. He then underwent a secret trial of which neither his family nor his defense lawyer were notified. It saw him sentenced to 4 years imprisonment. After having been denied visitation for over 3 years, Bo-Hsiang's wife was finally able to have a video call with him. I recently took part in a webinar with his wife. It was very moving. She reported that she noticed a tremor in his hand, that his hand was shaking. And she feared that some damage had been done to him, which meant that he was suffering neurological damage. She also noticed that several of his teeth were missing, and that clearly that was a result of probably a physical punching into his face. And she knew that he was suffering from internal ailments. He had lost weight, his face was drawn, and he complained of stomach problems. Bo-Hsiang's story, although harrowing, is not unique. Secret trials have become increasingly the order of the day. Despite the overt violation of the right to a fair trial under international law and the mandated opening of all trials to the public under domestic law, which is actually in Chinese law, and I'll turn to that in a minute. Similarly, denial of visitation, a constant in Chinese jails. Families not given access to their family member who's detained, poor prison conditions, and torture or ill treatment. They remain apparently prominent, as can be devised from anecdotal evidence, and I have no reason to doubt it. For those lawyers who have not been imprisoned, Chinese authorities have inserted themselves and their intimidation tactics into their lives, into the very interstices of everyday life after heavy government surveillance. This threat extends itself to the families of human rights defenders and lawyers who are routinely threatened. They're summoned for questioning, subjected to surveillance by the authorities, and socioeconomically affected on account of the loss of income to the household. There has also been an increased reliance on the suspension or revocation of lawyers' licenses. This is a common thing in authoritarian regimes, that they take away the license to operate as a lawyer. And so it's a less draconian way, but it's still an important way of subverting the rights and freedoms, not just of those in the legal profession, but of those who need access to justice in the general public. Attacking the lawyers attacks access to justice. And there's also been increased use of residential surveillance at a designated location, RSDL. And it's used against lawyers and human rights defenders, as this form of incarceration, it's like house arrest, is much less governed and much more clandestine. RSDL is an extrajudicial measure, and there's no requirement for a court order, and it can often be imposed before arrest, and is so invasive of the privacy and intimacy of the home. Lawyers are often detained under Article 40 of the Lawyers' Practice Management Measures, which states that lawyers shall not publish or disseminate statements that negate the fundamental political system and basic principles established by the Constitution or that endanger national security. They shall not use the internet or the media to provoke opposition to the party and to the government. So they're not allowed to talk about their cases or the ways in which the state might be abusing their clients. So one of the things that has happened is that many of us in other parts of the world who've spoken out have ourselves experienced incursions into our own freedom. I myself, as someone who has spoken out about the treatment of pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong and about the treatment of people subjected to human rights abuse within China, have been placed on a targeted sanctions list. Now, that was simply for freedom of expression. I, as a parliamentarian, had spoken out about what I saw as being abuses of human rights. And as a result, I'm not allowed to visit Hong Kong, Taiwan, China. And I have no abuses perpetrated against them by their state. But now I cannot visit or travel there. I cannot have any interest there, and nor can my family. This came about partly because we were calling upon, a number of us politicians were calling upon our legislature to be concerned about abuses of human rights and to make it part of our consideration in trading with mainland China, because it's the only leverage that we have, and we wanted our government to use it. But because we spoke out in Parliament, we have been subject to targeted sanctions by the Chinese government. China is bound both by international law and domestic law to ensure and practice the protection of lawyers from harassment, threat, arbitrary detention, and torture on the basis of lawful activities conducted in a professional capacity. And I just want you to know that the International Bar Association Human Rights Institute considers the protection of lawyers and our concerns about for lawyers at risk is of the utmost importance in our work. Much of our programming is directed at supporting lawyers who are at risk around the world. And here, of course, we're talking about in China. It's one, as I say, of our priorities. We're greatly involved in UN advocacy programs, and a particular one concerning China. And we stand ready to collaborate with states and with civil society on this issue of protecting lawyers, because without lawyers, you cannot get justice in societies. The Constitution of the People's Republic of China is, in fact, in many ways, an example of law that exists on paper, but not in practice. That constitution and peripheral legislation guarantee several fundamental human rights, including the right of freedom of speech and association. It's within the Chinese constitution at Article 35. People have due process rights, the right to a fair trial and the right to counsel under Article 125 of the Chinese constitution. And the compulsory opening of all trials to the public is referred to within the Constitution. And it's supposed to be that it's only in the most exceptional of circumstances, provided for in law, that they would close a court, and that would be where it was concerning matters of real secrecy, where it would be of concern to the national security if the court was open. In countries that does exist, it exists even in Britain, but very rarely used, and it's only used for those bits of the evidence which would be about matters of international secrecy that one wouldn't want shared with potential enemies. That's not the normal things of being able to use and exercise freedom of speech, and that's not a good enough reason for closing down a trial to public scrutiny. Article 37 of the Lawyers' Law of the People's Republic of China provides that a lawyer's right of the person is inviolable and affirms that a lawyer is not legally liable for the positions that he or she presents on a client's behalf. It also provides for the notification of family members and legal representative at the arrest and detention of an individual should be made available within 24 hours of the execution of the detention or of the arrest. Well, it certainly didn't happen for many of the lawyers of whom I'm speaking today. And it certainly didn't happen for the lawyer whose wife I met at an international event where we spoke together. The non-notification of family members is another real concern because of the fear that it creates in families for what has happened to the people that they love. China's ongoing persecution of lawyers is a further breach of their obligations under international conventions and customary international law. Article 16 of the UN Basic Principles on the Role of Lawyers provides that governments shall ensure that lawyers are able to perform all their professional functions without intimidation, hindrance, harassment, or improper interference. Article 18 of the UN Basic Principles provides that lawyers shall not be identified with their clients or their clients' causes as a result of discharging their functions. So representing someone who has made a protest or so on should not be a cause for arresting that lawyer. Article 10 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone is entitled in full equality to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal, and so on and so on. We know that people need to have lawyers and need to have independent and fearless lawyers act for them, whatever the nature of the allegation by the state. So it goes without saying that the practices of Chinese authorities against lawyers are in direct violation of the principles of the rule of law and of the independence of lawyers and of the judiciary. And so I say to everyone, it's our duty to speak out about what is happening and to do so fearlessly and to stand with our colleagues in China, because free societies need free lawyers and need free judges and need those rights to be protected. Thank you all, and I wish you luck.
This year, we have two distinguished parliamentarians send us messages, one from the European Parliament and the other from the US Congress. Let's play them.
Hello from Europe. My name is Reinhard Butikofer. I'm a member of the European Parliament and the chair of the European Parliament's China delegation. I want to thank China Change and all the other organizers of this year's China Human Rights Lawyers Day from the United States and from Taiwan for giving me the opportunity of saying just a few sentences here addressing all of you. I'm very grateful for the work that you're all doing in attending this important conference, because there is a great need to remind the international community time and time again of the important struggle that individuals have been waging in China in defense of human rights. The 9th of July 2015 stands out as a very sad day in the global history of fighting for human rights, because on that day, a mass arrest of human rights lawyers signaled that the Xi Jinping regime is not willing to countenance energetic defense of human rights. This work that has been oppressed, the work for which some 70 human rights lawyers have been disbarred, some 40 have had their licenses revoked, and some are still in jail. this work is valuable not only for the clients in each and every case, but also for the preservation of the hope for a better future of the Chinese people. And it is also valuable as an extremely important contribution to the universality of human rights and the universality of upholding them through day-to-day work. I know that this work, much of which is not even visible for the international community, is being done under the most severe of circumstances. I admire the courage and the engagement, the perseverance and the stubbornness, the righteousness and the frankness of the individuals that are engaging in these battles. And I hope that in years to come, we will also see a change for the better. I recall that years ago, in a conversation with some communist functionaries from the People's Republic of China, one of them said, well, we don't value human rights. This is just an excuse for foreign interference in China's internal affairs. Somebody else then, also from China, said, no, I believe that we should uphold human rights. And I hope that my grandchildren will live in a China that is upholding human rights with a world-class niveau. Presently, the situation is much worse than it was in those days. And presently, you probably couldn't utter these words publicly in China. But it is also to be noted that today, because of the atrocities that we all experience from different parts of China, there is a growing awareness that we all have to step up the support for the defense of human rights. And it is not a small item that the president of the German Federation of Industry, BDI, just recently in a public statement said that he expected German companies that are engaged in China to also be aware of the necessity of upholding human rights. He said, human rights is not an internal affair. Human rights is indeed, I would add, our common privilege and our common fight. Thank you for keeping up this fight. I wish your conference the best of success. Thanks for allowing me to address you. All the best.
Thank you, Pastor Bob Fu, for inviting me to participate in the 5th Annual China Human Rights Lawyers' Day. I've been a member of Congress for 41 years, and I know that Bob Fu is one of the most effective, dedicated, wise, and effective champions of human rights I have ever met. So thank you, Bob. As all of you know, to be a human rights lawyer in China today means risking your professional credentials, your freedom, and even your life in defending the defenseless. Sometimes I do wonder, when the history of modern China is written, will it record only the names of the tyrants and the torturers, or will it remember those who stood against tyranny? There are many great advocates we could name today, but I'd like to just focus on one, Gao Zhejiang. Gao Zhejiang has said, you cannot be a rights lawyer in China without becoming a rights case yourself. Through his absence today, his whereabouts unknown even to his family, we know about the cruelty of enforced disappearances of lawyers and human rights advocates. His story is particularly compelling to me because in 2012, I invited his wife, Gang He, to testify at a China Commission hearing that I chaired, and she told us how he was brutally tortured. She said, in September 2007, authorities disappeared Xinjiang and held him for over 50 days after he wrote an open letter to the U.S. Congress exposing human rights abuses in China. Policemen covered his head with a black mask and took him into a room where they stripped him naked and beat him. They used electric batons to shock him all over his body. Sadly, that abuse continues, we believe, to this day. In December of 2013, his daughter, Grace, bravely testified before my Human Rights Subcommittee about her father, Gao Zhizhang. And Grace told us of the heartbreaking story about how her family was constantly surveilled and harassed by the police. They used to follow her and her younger brother to school until one day they said she could no longer go to school anymore. With her mother, Grace, and her brother, they fled, eventually resettling in the United States. Consumed, however, with deep concern and deep love for her father, she, like her mother and brother, suffered great emotional pain. And yet she found within herself the strength to become an advocate. Her father, as we all know, is one of the best and bravest of China, and now his fate is unknown. What lawyers like Gao Zhizhang stand for is nothing less than the rule of law for everyone, particularly those persecuted, harassed, or aggrieved by the Chinese Communist Party. To the Chinese Communist Party, that is a dangerous idea. It means that they should be accountable to the people, to the hundreds of millions of people, in fact, seeking redress for persecution and CCP corruption. And thus they persecute, torture, and kill, and wage war against the defenders of the defenseless. Rather than being a sign of strength, however, persecution is a sign of profound weakness and a lack of confidence by the Chinese Communist Party. While we empathize with Grace along with her mom and her brother, we also remember her father's cause, and we remember his name, so that one day, when the history of modern China is written, it will record that Gao Zhizhang, like many other brave lawyers and defenders of human rights, bravely stood against tyranny. We look forward to that day when the tyranny of rule by law is replaced with the justice of the rule of law. I thank you, and may God bless each and every one of you.
As we start preparing for this event, the organizers have thought hard about how to convey the scale of persecution against the human rights lawyers in China to a wider audience within the frame of 2 hours. We bring you a 13-minute video presentation titled The Persecution List. It shows lawyers who are currently in jail or were imprisoned before, and lawyers who have been disbarred, law firms that have been shut down, lawyers who have been barred from traveling outside China, all for their human rights work. Let's play. it's always so heavy on my heart every time I watch this. I want to take the opportunity to remind our speakers and the audience that the crackdown on lawyers also extends, as you have seen from the clip, to people who speak out for them or to assist their work. There's a recent example. 3 NGO practitioners in Changsha have been detained and secretly tried, mainly for trying to assist the disbarred lawyers on how to carry on their work. Hopefully we'll discuss this case later, discuss more. The subject of this event is human rights lawyers in China. Naturally, the organizers wish to have them speaking at the event, but for them, it's not as easy as clicking a link. They're busy, but that's not an issue. Can they scale the Great Firewall smoothly? Will they be threatened not to take part? You bet. The Chinese authorities seem to feel particularly nervous about this year's event. I guess I have to thank all of you for being on this panel, and together you make the Chinese government nervous. So we asked a number of them to send us video messages, but I know many human rights lawyers are in our audience watching the live stream. They're not here in the meeting room, but they are with us. In the video, you will hear 5 lawyers and 3 family members speaking. Let's play.
嗨，大家好，我是王全章，中国人权律师，很高兴以这种方式跟大家会面。我向大家汇报一下我的近况。从去年4月5号被释放到现在有1年多的时间，在这段时间里，我经历了很多事情，面临很多问题，包括个人的、家庭的、社会的，还有世界的。那么从我个人而言，我的身体和心理经历了一个适应和康复的过程，到现在已经恢复的差不多了。我也开始跟我的朋友联系，跟我过去的一些客户联系，梳理我的一些案件，慢慢的发展我的工作。同时呢，我们还注意到，在过去一些大的社会事件依然在频繁爆发，一些极端的社会案件依旧层出不穷。那么如何降低这些悲剧性事件的发生，如何给这些案件的处理提供一个公正和真相的出口，这一直是法律学习者思考的问题。同时我们还看到人权捍卫者的活动依然被压制，一些人权捍卫者被抓捕，一些人权律师的执照被吊销，官方对人权捍卫者的活动不能容忍。最近苏州的王和英仅仅因为公开倡导一次聚会而被消失到现在。指定居所、监视居住这种反人道、反人权的做法，不但没有被废止，反而被广泛的滥用，已经由过去针对一些政治案件、政治人士，发展到针对一些普通的案件，针对一些商人，譬如最近的分大武案，已有的法治和人权的根基被动摇，甚至被摧毁。大陆法律界人士孜孜以求的民决团制度不但没有被建立，反而香港已有的民决团在政治审判中被废止，社会的法治全面倒退。在疫情全球大流行这样一个特殊的历史时期，公共权力全面扩张，维护人权更加艰难，但也显得更加的重要和可贵。在此感谢全球的人权捍卫者，感谢人权捍卫者、人权律师的同行者、支持者，让我们共同努力，勇敢面对。谢谢大家。
大家好，我叫许燕，是于文生律师的妻子。首先，非常感谢各界人士对于文生律师、对中国人权律师、人权捍卫者的关注和帮助。于文生律师为多位709律师进行辩护和代理进行控告和发表声明，他的行为也让中国政府非常的记恨。在2018年把于文生抓捕以后，对他进行了非常残酷的对待。首先，约2年7个月的时候，才第一次让辩护律师会见到他，得知他的右手已经颤抖残疾的不可以写字。差5天就3年整的时候，才第一次让妻子许燕和于文生律师视频会见了25分钟。2年7个月让于文生完全与外界隔绝，不知道他的身体情况，连案件情况我和律师都查不到。我和律师去了现场，各部门现场约50多次，几乎所有的大门都进不了。我写了大约300多份申请各级部门的监督材料，几乎全部没有回复。于文生律师案被秘密开庭、秘密判决，现在把于文生从北京关押到1045公里以外的南京监狱。现在的于文生除了右手残疾颤抖的不可以写字以外，也已经没有力气夹菜，没有力气刷牙，而且最近他的左手也开始了颤抖，牙齿掉了4颗，至今也没有装新牙。我非常担心的问题是2022年中国政府是否能放于文生回到北京的家里与妻子孩子团聚。所以我请求各界人士能够要求中国政府立即给于文生治疗右手残疾的问题和牙齿脱落的问题。同时，最后我也想请求大家能够持续的对中国人权律师、人权捍卫者和他们的家庭给予持续的关注和帮助。谢谢大家。
大家好，我是谢彦义。众所周知，709发生以后呢，国内的人权形势每况愈下。我本人自709出来以后啊，律师执照也被非法注销，全家被限制出境一直处于被非法监控的状态。感谢海内外朋友们一直以来的关心，感谢朋友们坚持为国内同道发声，以及给予的各种人道支持。未来的日子里呢，我们更需要站在一起，抵抗各种不公不义。谢谢大家。
朋友们，你们好，我是709家属王俏玲，
我是李文足。
在这个意义非凡的日子，
第5届中国人权律师节，
我们向中国的人权律师致以深深的敬意。
你们的坚韧、勇气和担当是我们深深敬佩的。
我们向所有支持和关注709案的朋友们表示深深的感谢，谢谢你们。正因为有你们的支持和关注，我们2个家庭得以全家团圆。我们也盼望在目前情况下失去自由的中国人权律师可以早日获得自由，与家人团聚。
也盼望朋友们继续关注中国人权律师的状况。谢谢。
谢谢。
大家好，我是王宇，我是来自北京的人权律师。首先感谢大家，对我们中国人权律师的关注和支持。自2015年以来，中国的人权律师受到了前所未有的一个打击和迫害。很多律师在监狱里，也有更多的律师无法执业。像我们夫妻2个，也是这其中的一员吧。我们先是被监禁，之后被软禁，然后现在从2015年开始到现在，我们就无法以律师的身份执业。但是呢，在大家的关注、支持和鼓励下呢，我们仍然以 一个普通公民的身份去为一些当事人提供法律服务。我们一直是被限制出境，无法去国外去探望孩子。现在我们已经和我们的孩子分别有3年多了，我们确实非常惦记孩子，但是在这样的一个国度里边，我们确实也没有其他的办法。
大家好，我是包龙军，我在这里感谢各位朋友对我们国内人权律师的关注和支持。我是15年709被抓，当时也是正在实习阶段。自此我的律师生涯应该说是就结束了。但是现在呢，我一直以公民代理的身份，以一个法律工作者的身份，一直参与各类案件。像民事的、行政的、刑事的，这2年我都有涉足。尤其以拆迁方面为主。尽管这方面受到了当局的种种刁难，但是呢，我觉得我依旧的能够在当事人的配合下，能够以法律方面，来和他们进行一些基本的交涉，为维护当事人的最根本的利益提供一些力所能及的帮助。在此也真诚的祝福你们，就是祝福所有国内同行们，能够更加安全的度过现在残酷的冬天。
我是林奇磊。2009年，我们创办了北京市瑞凯律师事务所，之后办理了相当一部分的人权案件，因此我们被官方关注刁难。2018年6月1号开始，北京市司法局及朝阳区司法局以各种理由对我们所及全体律师不予年度考核。2021年1月4日，北京市司法局以荒唐的理由强行注销了我们的律师事务所。可以想见，6个月以后，我们3个合伙人的律师证也将面临注销的局面。但是我们多年来都是严格按照法律规定办案，虽然现在的形势非常恶劣，但是坚持法律、追求人权是我们不变的一个理念。前方的路无论有多少困难和危险，我们都会坚定地走下去。
Mr. Frank Wolf is a former U.S. representative serving from 1981 to his retirement in 2015. During his tenure in Congress, he championed a wide range of measures in U.S.-China relations. He was among the few most vocal critics of human rights abuses in China while he was in Congress. He met with a number of human rights lawyers from China over the years, held hearings. He sent us a video message speaking about one particular human rights lawyer closest to his heart, Gao Zhisheng. Let's play Congressman Wolf's message.
Hi, I'm former Congressman Frank Wolf. The importance of human rights lawyers cannot be understated. They're able to promote not only the value of individual dignity and human worth, but also the values of peace and a just rule of law. This is especially true in China under the Chinese Communist Party, where power is used to target the vulnerable, the different, and the outspoken. China's brave human rights lawyers are able to push back against oppression from within the existing system in order to protect their clients' inherent dignity. Few were more inspiring than renowned lawyer Gao Xingjiang. Next month, on August 13, will mark the 4th anniversary of his forced disappearance. Gao is a valiant warrior for human rights in China and is perhaps the most well-known rights attorney in the country. For decades, he defended China's most targeted people, including Christians in Xinjiang and Falun Gong practitioners. Because of this, he has been imprisoned by the authorities many times and suffered at least 3 counts of torture. Before he disappeared this time around, Gao had been living under house arrest in China for 3 years. Then on August 13, 2017, 2 of his supporters helped him sneak into the neighboring province, where they spent several weeks in hiding. At first, no one knew where he was and thought he had been taken immediately into police custody. However, the authorities were searching frantically for him, and they arrested him in a nearby province. Gao has not been seen or heard from since. Just this last month, his wife Geng, he has called on the Chinese government to hand over his remains, as she believes he must be dead. In a statement outside the Consulate General of the People's Republic of China in San Francisco on April 19, she said Gao Xingjiang suffered because he loved China too much. She said it was his glory to be buried in her motherland. From this day onward, she said, I will treat the CCP's consulate, the closest one to my home, as his cemetery. I will be bringing our children here to pay our respects from this day forward, at the start and the middle of every month, and on the Qingming festival until the day I die. Most of us will never be able to fully understand the weight of her words and sacrifice. I urge you to keep Gao and his family in your prayers. The Chinese Communist Party continues to dominate the judiciary and control the appointment of all judges, and in certain cases directly dictate the court's ruling. Authorities harass, detain, and arrest lawyers who promote independent efforts to combat abuses of power. But all hope is not lost. The 709 crackdown did not deter the bravest men and women from their effort to make a more just and fair China. These defenders continue to fight like Gao out of love, not hatred for their country. It is our job now to support them through advocacy, prayer, and the retelling of their stories. We must pray for them. Thank you.
任律师，请讲话。
大家好，我是中国河南郑州的人权律师任全牛。感谢本次人权律师节活动的各个主办方，感谢每一位幕后辛苦付出的朋友，也感谢给我这次发言的机会。我是在2010年取得的律师执业证，起初在公司做了4年的法务工作。2013年离开企业后，接触到的第一个维权案件是为河南省内5个艾滋病人辩护。不久又参与了房屋被拆迁群体的维权案件。2014年初，我第一次接触法轮功信仰者被迫害打压的案子。2015年参与为709事件当事人辩护维权。 2016年7月8日，在709事件1周年前夜，被河南郑州当局以涉嫌寻衅滋事罪刑事拘留27天，后被取保候审1年。在过去数年里，我做的主要案件是为各地的法律做过无罪辩护。在此，我希望介绍最近的2起案件，一个是12港人案。2020年9月7日，我接受涉嫌偷渡的12港人案之一的家属的委托，第一次到深圳盐田区看守，要求会见当事人，被大门外的接待人员以委托书需要办理公证为由无理拒绝。第一次去深圳，虽然没有顺利介入案件，但也接受了多家媒体的采访。我还没有回到河南郑州家里，便接到了当局的电话，要求我不要接受外媒采访。回到郑州后，当地国保警察约谈见面，要求我退出案件代理，说这个案件级别很高，弄不好会使我丢了律师牌。我当时并不以为然，这期间就陆续听说好几位原本计划参与12港人案的辩护律师，未等家属签署的委托书邮寄到，就被所在地的国保警察或国安人员约谈，并强令禁止代理，这就导致12港人案的辩护律师团胎死腹中，被当局强力阻止。我第二次去深圳是9月18号，郑州当局便派遣2名国保警察陪同，目的是控制我的言行。第二次到深圳，当局已经想出了一套排除所有家属聘请律师的手段。办法是，即便家属聘请的律师拿着有效的公证委托书和亲属关系证明，办案机关仍以12港人案在看守所被羁押期间自己聘请了2名当地律师为由，阻止了所有由家属聘请的律师介入案件。虽然几位辩护律师也去监督机关控告过数次，但是毫无作用。第二次从深圳回来后，郑州当局便明显加大了施压的力度，数次强令必须退出案件代理，不能接受采访。我始终没有答应退出。2020年底，12港人案作出判决。2021年元旦假期结束的头一天，我便接到河南省司法厅做出的拟吊销律师执照的通知。2月份，我的律师执照被吊销。同样代理了12港人案的四川卢思卫律师，也在2021年初被吊销了律师牌照。另外，我讲一下去年12月张展案的庭审情况。我和武汉的张科科律师担任了张展的辩护人。大家对张展案已经多有了解。张展是一名前律师，2020年2月中旬从上海到达武汉，以普通公民的身份采访报道武汉新冠疫情的情况。5月初，上海警方伙同武汉警方抓捕了张展，指控他寻衅滋事。这完全是一起言论自由迫害案。上海警方在拘捕张展后，并没有侦查网上通缉的所谓犯罪事实，而是全面搜集张展在武汉3个月期间有关新冠疫情的言论，并以此作为罪证。在上海浦东看守所，张展进行了绝食抗议。他不止一次对律师讲，他绝食不是为自己争自由，是抗议当局欺骗民众，不给人民自由和人权。律师多次向上海司法当局提出给有生命危险的张展办理取保候审，每次都遭到拒绝。在上海浦东法院的审判中，法官禁止张展表达意见，数次剥夺他发言的机会。辩护人提出证人出庭， 并要求公诉人出示指控张展的视频及接受采访的所谓罪证，都被拒绝了，理由是辩护人庭前已经看过了。这种赤裸裸的践踏刑事诉讼法且罔顾事实的审判，已经完全沦落成了迫害良善的工具。张展被判刑4年，投入监狱后，至今一直未获得亲属会见。他很可能还在绝食抗议，希望大家继续关注他，营救他。我很担心他会有生命危险。谢谢大家，就讲这么多。
非常感谢任律师来参加我们，你的到来对我们来说意义非凡。I want to especially thank Lawyer Ren for taking part on the site. It means a lot to all of us. Next, we will hear from two brave lawyers who are with us in the room. Luo Shengchun and Shi Minglei. They both have their husband in prison now. They will speak about the increasing hardship human rights lawyers face in their practice. In China, defending clients' human rights in the courtroom has always been a perilous career, more so now than ever. Ideally, a practicing lawyer should be speaking about the topic, but the fact is, a simple speech like this could endanger their law credentials. However, the next two joint speakers are uniquely situated to speak about the topic too. You will learn that. Ms. Luo and Ms. Shi, please proceed.
Hello, everyone. My name is Luo Shengchun. I am the wife of lawyer Ding Jiaxi, who was detained in connection with the December 26 Xiamen gathering case. I first became familiar with the community of human rights lawyers when Ding Jiaxi was detained for the first time in April 2013. Over the next 8 years, I witnessed the difficulties and the deteriorating circumstances faced by human rights lawyers in their practice. It is an extremely worrying situation. I was made especially aware of this when I spent the past year and more appealing for Ding Jiaxi in the Xiamen case. I felt acutely that human rights lawyers in China are in a worsening predicament, and that we urgently need to bring this to the immediate attention of the international community and supporters who work in the legal profession around the globe.
My name is Shi Minglei. My husband Cheng Yuan and his two colleagues, Liu Dazhi, Wu Gejianxiong, have been arbitrarily detained by the Chinese government for 719 days. Cheng Yuan is a founder of NGO Changsha Funeng. In the 2 years prior to their arrest, the Changsha Three contributed greatly to advocating for and protecting the rights of Chinese human rights lawyers, especially for those whose licenses were revoked. They have sacrificed much for their efforts. They are now personally experiencing being stripped of their rights to legal defense and communication. Wu Gejianxiong was also forced to dismiss his own father, lawyer Wu Youshui. Our families are kept in dark about the government-assigned lawyers whose identity is apparently a state secret. They too face brutal torture as well as the pain of knowing that our families facing recurring persecution. For example, the day my husband was arrested, I was put into Blackwood, handcuffed, threatened, and put into home arrest for 180 days. And my 3-year-old baby witnessed the arrest of her daddy and the threat against me. And my daughter's church school was also forced to close. I want to alert the international community to the predicament faced by China's human rights lawyers and Changsha 3.
Shengchun, your mic is off.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I restart. Chinese human rights lawyers face increasingly dire circumstances in the practicing process. The following are personal experiences from the lawyers in our families, as well as information we have gathered from other cases. Number 1. Secret detention, violent disappearances, torture, secret trials, and extended detention as experienced by lawyers such as Gao Zhisheng, Wang Quanzhang, Yu Wensheng, and Li Yuhan. Number 2. Illegally prolonged house arrest and denial of freedom of movement. These are examples of non-release releases, as suffered by lawyers such as Jiang Tianyong. Number 3. Direct prevention of lawyers' engagement in human rights cases. 4 lawyers in the Chang Weiping case and 2 lawyers in the Ding Jiaxi case were forced to withdraw. As a client, I made a phone call inquiry into nearly 20 lawyers to ask if they would take on my husband's case. They either did not respond or told me bluntly that the Justice Bureau did not allow representing in Ding Jiaxi's case due to its political sensitivity. In the 2020 Hong Kong 12 case, several lawyers were also forced to withdraw after signing contract. Number 4. Lawyers are being threatened before taking on and while handling their cases. These threats include failing their annual inspection, revoking or canceling the lawyer's license, dissolving their law firm, and restricting lawyers and their family members from traveling outside China. In many cases, the above threats have become reality. For example, lawyer Tang Jitian is still blocked by the Chinese government from visiting his seriously ill daughter Tang Zhenqi, who has been hospitalized in an ICU in Japan for 2 months. Number 5. Lawyers are prohibited from accepting interviews, posting tweets, and restricted from making statements on the cases and the clients the lawyer are representing. Number 6. The authorities arbitrarily classify case files and force lawyers to sign confidential agreements before they are allowed to read the files. This happened in the case of lawyer Qin Yongpei, as well as the cases of Ding Jiaxi and Xu Zhiyong. Number 7. Lawyers are not allowed to make copies of the case files. They are only permitted to view and take excerpts, which makes it very challenging for lawyers to review the case. Number 8. Lawyers are prohibited from taking photos or making videos and audio recordings. When meeting with the litigant. Meanwhile, meetings with the clients are illegally wiretapped.
Number 9, interference in lawyers' case handling as pertains to legal procedures such as denial of lawyer and client meetings, disallowing lawyers' appearance in court, restricting or prohibiting speech from lawyers during court sessions, blocking lawyers' cross-examination efforts during court hearings, denying requests from witness appearances, and prohibition or restriction of family members' appearance at court hearings. Number 10, forcing the client to dismiss lawyers brought in by family, despite opposition and protest of family members, forcibly assigning government-appointed lawyers. The 6 lawyers in the Changsha 3 case were collectively dismissed and replaced with government-appointed lawyers on the day the investigation period expired. In the Duan Dianxing case, Chen Mei and Cai Wei were arrested for backing up information on the spread of the coronavirus. Chen Mei's lawyer Liang Xiaojun was replaced by government-appointed lawyers. In the Hong Kong 12 case, the defendants were also forcibly assigned government-appointed lawyers. Number 11, in court, public prosecutors and the legal personnel are able to assault and beat lawyers at will. Lawyers' basic rights to defense and personal dignity are also disrespected. To cite a few examples in recent years, in 2017, lawyers Lu Tingge and Li Xiongping were assaulted by the belief when handling a case in Sichuan. In 2015, lawyer Wang Quanzhang was in 2015, lawyer Wang Quanzhang was assaulted by the belief when he appeared in court in Shandong. Lawyer Chen Hai was assaulted when taking cases in Dalian, Beijing, and Tianjin. Number 12, assault by unidentified persons. Lawyer Chen Keyun was assaulted by unidentified persons near his home in Guangzhou this April. The police ignored his calls for help, and he found it impossible to file a report later. In 2017, another lawyer, Li Baiguang, was abducted and beaten by unidentified individuals when handling a case in Zhejiang. Number 13, pressuring human rights lawyers by harassing their family members and close relations. For example, lawyer Chang Weiping's parents and siblings were threatened. Lawyer Lu Tingge's family members were harassed. Kidnapping, and the beating of lawyers' children, such as the son of lawyer Wang Yu, who was beaten and placed under house arrest after his parents were arrested. Lawyers' children forcibly kicked out of school, such as the children of lawyers Wang Quanzhang, Li Heping, and Chen Jiangang, who had their enrollment qualifications forcibly revoked by their schools. Pressuring lawyers' landlords, forcing the lawyers to move out. Pressuring employers of the lawyers' family members, resulting in termination of their employment. Human rights lawyers in China are a solid line of defense for Chinese human rights. These lawyers are now facing immense pressure and making huge sacrifices, making it increasingly more difficult to defend human rights in China. The plight of Chinese human rights lawyers is in desperate need of international awareness and action. Thank you.
Thank you both. That's a very long list. Now we move on to the next hour to hear from our distinguished panel. Before each of you speak, please check to make sure your mic is on, right? First, we'll hear from Jerome Cohen. Professor Cohen is a law professor at the NYU School of Law since 1990 and the faculty director of its US-Asia Law Institute. He's a leading American expert on Chinese law and the government. A pioneer in the field, Professor Cohen began studying and teaching about China's legal system in the early 1960s, and from 1964 to 1979, introduced the teaching of Asia law into the curriculum of Harvard Law School. As a scholar and a lawyer, his experience in US-China relations is like an encyclopedia. But for our purpose, I'm content to point out that he has interacted with the human rights lawyers in China over 2 decades and continues writing and speaking about them on a regular basis. Professor Cohen, please.
Thank you, Yaxue. I hope you can hear me.
We can. We're fine. You're fine.
Good. This is a most impressive and moving program. And I'm honored to be asked again, as last year, to take part. I wish I could be more encouraging than last year about the prospects for China's human rights lawyers and other Chinese advocates for political and civil liberties in their country. Of course, I again want to try to rally China's beleaguered human rights activists and their many foreign supporters to keep the faith. We must not lessen our support for all those engaged in the great and historic effort to nourish the development of justice, due process, government under law, and freedoms of expression in China, even while those of us outside China strive to meet similar challenges in our own societies. Yet we owe each other and our shared cause the duty of candor. Illusions and self-deception cannot serve us. We are engaged in a long-run struggle. The 6 years since the start of the tragic 709 crackdown are a mere speck in China's long history. Even the 70 years since the establishment of the People's Republic is but a short interval. It is important to note that these most recent 7 decades have been marked by major swings in the pendulum of political development. The current Xi Jinping era is especially depressing to those who hope for a democratic dawn, or at least a more pluralistic and freer country that offers protection to individual rights. But change will come again. I think that's crucial. Many of us predicted, even during the darkest days of Mao's Cultural Revolution, that there would be change. I recommend that everyone inside and outside China see the so-called film comedy, The Death of Stalin. As the 19th century poet Swinburne wrote, "No life lives forever." In the interim, What should we be doing? Certainly, we should give all the support we can to those who, despite all obstacles, continue to engage in the struggle for the protection of human rights in China. We should continue to let them know that we greatly appreciate the risks and suffering they endure and the contributions that they are managing to make. We must do much more to inform the world about the true situation of China's human rights lawyers and the extent to which the PRC's criminal process serves as totalitarianism's major weapon of repression and injustice. We must also provide full support to those Chinese human rights lawyers who escaped from China, and we must benefit from the accurate information and advice that they bring us. Finally, we must attempt to persuade UN institutions, other international organizations, foreign governments and legislatures, NGOs, the media, bar associations, law firms, law schools, and individual lawyers, judges, officials, scholars, and students to focus on the suppression of China's human rights lawyers and to maximize pressures to alleviate their persecution. Every day, in many fora, we have to keep asking questions such as, is the great lawyer Gao Zhisheng dead or alive? Is the great civic reformer Xu Zhiyong again suffering torture while imprisoned? We must not succumb to compassion fatigue. If we increase our efforts, perhaps next year's 709 conference will be convened in a more optimistic atmosphere. Thanks very much. I look forward to the remainder of the program.
Thank you, Professor Cohen. I don't know what else to say. Just thank you so much for being here every year for us. Our next speaker, Professor Terence Halliday, is a research professor at the American Bar Foundation, a specialist in globalization and law. He has met and interviewed face-to-face a great number of human rights lawyers in Beijing and the other cities in China. And his latest book is entitled Criminal Defense in China, The Politics of Lawyers at Work. Professor Halliday, your turn. Make sure your mic is on.
Seems the mic is not on.
Friends in China, I welcome the occasion to bring a message from your friends across the entire world, East and West, South and North. Dictators and authoritarian leaders are so very proud of their military might, so confident in the control exercised by their internal security apparatus over their own people. Think of Hitler and the Nazi regime that he boasted would last 1,000 years. The militaristic Japan of the 1930s and 1940s. The 20th century repressive regimes in South Korea and Taiwan. the military dictatorships in Chile and Argentina and Brazil, all with powerful militaries, all reliant on the weapons of fear, torture, disappearance, and death. All of them now gone. At the height of their powers, like the ancient and modern empires, they all seemed impregnable, but they were hollow inside. They had no soul. Their grip on the hearts of their peoples were as weak as sand in the flood of a mighty river. And so they were swept away. That mighty river is the flood of freedom, a freedom whose leading waves time and again are lawyers. Certainly not all lawyers, certainly not all of the time, but certainly there is a vanguard of lawyers who raise the flag of freedom with law as their weapon of choice. China, in the 21st century, is a prime example of heroic lawyers. I have known many of you, China's defense lawyers, for many years. We've sat together in cafes and restaurants, in law firms and coffee shops, in hotel lobbies, and parks across China's cities and towns, counties and villages. I know your ideals, and so does the world. What are those ideals? You, China's defense lawyers, take your stand with the highest ideals of the international order. In 2015, the year of the 709 crackdown, the Secretary General of the United Nations asserted that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has given people everywhere a powerful tool in the fight against oppression, impunity, and affronts to human dignity. Many of you, China's defense and rights lawyers, also gain inspiration from a 3,000-year-old set of beliefs core to the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. As a Christian defense lawyer confidently asserted to me, where do human rights come from? We know that God created man according to his image. I understand that our dignity and rights come from God's image. Human rights in this transcendent vision will never be extinguished by a political party or a brutal ruler or a cruel regime built on fear. How have you, 709 lawyers and China's defense lawyers, expressed your vision of a new China that builds itself upon universal values of freedom, equality, and dignity? You have told me that you strive for a constitutional legal order. You reject today's legal and social order because it relies ultimately on arbitrary arrests, torture, disappearances, forced labor, unfair court proceedings. You press for tomorrow's China, where the Constitution conforms to universal ideals of rights and justice, to the protection of basic legal freedoms and core civil rights. You, China's rights lawyers, fight for core political rights. You reject today's China, where a bold doctor is silenced for speaking out about the COVID epidemic, where churches and mosques and temples are bulldozed into rubble, where any criticism of the Chinese Communist Party leads to disappearance or prison. You hope for a tomorrow when all China's peoples can speak freely, to express diverse political views and worship freely. China's defense lawyers fight for an open civil society. You reject today's China, where the party holds a tight grip on voluntary associations. You press for tomorrow's China, where any of China's citizens and residents can freely form voluntary associations to share their interests and causes, where lawyers can elect their own leaders and direct their own affairs. You want tomorrow's China, where citizens can march in the streets to protect women, to protest police brutality, to demand justice for disappeared loved ones. You, China's defense lawyers, yearn for a moderate state. You reject today's China, where all power is concentrated in a single political party, the Chinese Communist Party. You press for tomorrow's China, where courts and judges can hold accountable the executive power of the party state, where the legislative branch of government is accountable to the Constitution, where rule by might is limited by rule of law. We know your ideals. We know your struggles come at great cost.
It's a shame.
We know your suffering. You have told me of the never-ending uncertainty of when you will be seized when walking down the street, taking the train, sleeping in the dead of night. The terror of living with your family under threat, of a government that doesn't hesitate to kidnap children or threaten the elderly parents of rights lawyers. The pain of physical torture, psychological torture, humiliations in custody, forced public confessions, the knowledge that you may die in a black prison, be thrown into a hole, and never heard of again, be denied medical treatment, so you die an arbitrary and cruel death. Yet, be certain of this. Know that your voices are alive in the free world. Know that your words are written down and published by great university presses and widely read academic journals. Know that your names remain very present in the great advocacy organizations of international civil society. Know that your voices ring out in absentia in the European Parliament and the United States Congress and in the halls of the United Nations Human Rights Council and in many other national capitals. Know that religious organizations of billions of believers keep your ideals fresh and enduring. Know that your sister and brother lawyers in free bar associations are standing in solidarity with you, never ceasing to support your ideals for basic legal freedoms, rule of law, and an authentic constitutionalism. Know that the international free media broadcast the sufferings of your people to vast audiences. Know that your friends are near, across the Taiwan Strait, in South Korea, in Japan, in India. Know you have far-flung friends across the oceans in the Americas, Europe, and in the free countries of Asia and Africa. I also have a message for Chinese Communist Party rulers and your accomplices in the regime of fear, brutality, and repression. You keep lists of those you imagine are threats to your rule. Know this, the world also keeps lists. The world watches you. You will be held accountable. Monitors in the outside world track intensively your acts. They know your names. They record your harms. Monitors inside China, too, have memories, and memories that one day will be released from confinement. A day of reckoning is coming for China's oppressors, just as it came for those in Germany, and Chile, and Argentina, and Japan, and the Congo, and Rwanda, and France. Finally, many of China's defense lawyer friends overseas have also known repression, the dark shadows of authoritarian fear, the terror of dark and unknown prisons. Yet, hope remained. And now, they are free. They know that the human impulse for freedom and dignity, for self-determination and freedoms of belief and worship, for the preservation of languages and culture, cannot be crushed indefinitely. Hollow regimes fall. Lawyers and their ideals for basic legal freedoms, civil society, a moderate state, rule of law, and constitutionalism have inexorably persisted for centuries. And those ideals have been realized wherever the sun rises and the sun sets. These are dark hours in the People's Republic of China, but tomorrow is coming.
雅学没开麦，雅学。
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize for forgetting my mic. Thank you, Professor Halliday. It's such a powerful and hopeful message for the human rights lawyers in China and also for all of us working overseas. Our next speaker is Ms. Magdalena Witkowska. She is a Polish lawyer and the vice chair of the Human Rights Committee, Council of Bars and Law Societies of Europe, or known as the CCBE. CCBE has been a constant voice in supporting human rights lawyers in China. And I want particularly note that CCBE awarded the Chinese lawyer Li Heping the 2008 CCBE Human Rights Award. Ms. Witkowska, please.
Did you turn on your mic?
Please. 盛春，我来说好吗？ Your mic, please turn your mic on.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, do you hear me? Okay. So, dear organizers of today's event, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude for inviting the CCBE to attend this event and the opportunity to express our support and admiration for the activism of Chinese lawyers in defending human rights and professional independence. The Council of Bars and Law Societies of Europe represents the bars and law societies of 45 countries and throughout them more than 1 million European lawyers. The CCBE places great emphasis on respect for human rights and the rule of law, and particularly concerned by the situation of human rights defenders in the world. The CCBE takes initiatives in support of lawyers and under threat worldwide. When a lawyer is a victim of human rights violation, the CCBE alerts the relevant national authorities and their embassies in Brussels by sending them letters. In these letters, we describe the situation of a certain lawyer and ask the respective authorities to stop the allegedly illegal treatment of the colleague. With these letters, the CCBE ensures that attacks on the legal profession are brought to light in order to ensure that lawyers are able to carry out their professional duties without the fear or reprisal, hindrance, intimidation, or harassment. In several cases, CCBE also receives feedbacks directly from the lawyers in support in this letter, expressing how important it is for them to be and feel supported by the international community in their daily struggles. The CCBE also regularly relays the information to key actors at the European Union, the Council of Europe, and United Nations. The CCBE letters by far do not cover all the cases where legal profession is threatened. The illustration, to illustrate this, between 2010 and 2020, approximately 2,500 lawyers worldwide have been murdered, arrested, or threatened in the exercise of their legitimate activities as lawyers. For that reason, the CCBE also takes or joins additional initiatives in cooperation with other bars, national and international lawyers organizations, as well as human rights NGOs, in order to further promote and protect the rule of law and the role of lawyers. All CCBE letters and joint initiatives in support to endangered lawyers are made public on social media and are available in the CCBE Human Rights Portal. In that context, in 2017, the CCB also submit that there was a compelling case for establishing a European Convention on the profession of lawyer to create binding obligation for those rights and envisaged by this existing specific non-binding instruments, which were not already reflected in the European Convention on Human Rights. Since then, CCBE is therefore actively supporting the work of the Council of Europe toward the establishment of such a new binding legal instrument to create the necessary conditions for effective accountability of states and non-state actors. The CCB strongly believes that such a specific binding instrument is needed in order to preserve the independence, integrity of the administration of justice and the rule of law. Such a convention would not only protect lawyers themselves, but would also enable them to exercise their profession in complete independence, freedom, and security without prejudice and without hindrance, and therefore provide adequate access to justice for citizens for the protection of their fundamental rights and freedoms. This new convention, if adopted, could also serve as an example for the defense of the legal profession in the world. As it was already mentioned, in addition to this, every year since 2007, CCB has granted a Human Rights Award. The objective of the CCB is to honor distinguished lawyers organization that have demonstrated outstanding commitment and sacrifice to uphold fundamental values. It is an effective and useful tool to raise awareness of the core values of the legal profession. And as it was already mentioned, the Human Rights Award 2008 was granted to Li Haiping as a well-known and prominent Chinese lawyer. In China, since the July 2015 crackdown, known as the 709 crackdown, over 300 lawyers, law firm staff, and human rights defenders have been detained, arrested, held incommunicado, summoned, or otherwise had their freedom temporarily restricted. Lawyers have been subjected to harassment due to their insistence on performing their professional duties. Others were held for their peaceful human rights activities and advocacy campaigns. Some of them have also been portrayed as criminals. the outcome of our efforts to defend Chinese lawyers. We will continue to do so and support any activities taken by other organizations with the same goal. Speaking directly to Chinese lawyers, I would like to assure you on behalf of the CCBE and European lawyers that we will never leave you alone in your fight for human rights and professional independence. Thank you for your attention.
We just had a moment ago, we just had a little bit of tech problem. We seem to have fallen off the line. Did you all have the same problem, or we? Okay, sorry. It seems to be from not from any one of us individually. It seems to be from the host. I'm glad we're back. Thank you, Ms. Witkowska. We will be seeking out CCPE. You can count on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, we will discuss and we will speak. Our next speaker, Ms. Jacqueline Scott, is an American lawyer whose device practice focuses on labor law, tax law, arbitration, and human rights. She is the current Director General of the Institute for the Rule of Law of the International Association of Lawyers. Please, Ms. Scott.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to begin by thanking the organizers of this 5th China Human Rights Lawyers Day, first for hosting this extremely timely and important conference, and second for giving me the honor of speaking alongside such an eminent group of panelists. I am very honored to represent UIA-IROL here today as we gather not only to share ways in which we can defend our endangered colleagues, but also to honor the work and sacrifice of our Chinese colleagues who have courageously and tirelessly committed themselves to defending human rights and the rule of law, even when their own lives and the lives of their families are at stake. I am truly humbled by the unparalleled bravery of our Chinese colleagues who we have heard from today, and from those who could not be here because they feared for their own safety. The 709 crackdown is still among the largest and most egregious demonstrations of government-led repression unleashed against lawyers and human rights activists in the world. That's quite a designation. Hundreds of lawyers, jurists, law firm employees, and their families, all committed to human rights, as we have heard and seen, have been arrested, harassed, banned from traveling, placed under various forms of preventive detention throughout China during the crackdown. 6 years later, the situation of human rights defenders and lawyers in the People's Republic of China not only has not improved, but has indeed worsened. We note with great concern that the control exerted over lawyers and their management has been strengthened, and there has been a major upsurge in prosecutions, arrests, detentions, and other extremely serious measures of repression. We are indeed continuously at UIA receiving reports about our colleagues who continue to be charged, detained, and exercising their profession, denied access to justice, threatened, rejected a role. Since its creation as a distinct unit of the International Association of Lawyers, has been devoted to the defense and promotion of the rule of law. To that end, UIA-IROL focuses on addressing essential human rights issues, including access to justice, the independence of the judiciary, and the freedom and independence of the legal and judicial professions, all of which are essential elements of the rule of law. Can you hear me?
Ms. Scott, your sound is on and off. Yeah,
I can see no
could you, Ms. Scott, your line
Okay,
connection seems,
I'm
yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. Take your time, don't worry.
Okay, I can hear now and then. Others? Can you hear? Now people are coming back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but the sound is still a little not stable. Try again.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
It's better.
Is that
yeah.
better?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, we can see you now. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm going to drop off and sign in again. I'm going to drop off and sign in again. Give me 1 minute.
Okay, take your time. It's fine. We're all here waiting.
Okay. It may be you, but I'm in the middle of a tropical storm, and this is the absolute height of the storm raging outside. So that may be part of the reason. Okay.
We should be glad that you're even on. So please continue.
Okay. UIA-IROL, therefore, is on the front line of the defense and supports and defends, in particular, lawyers, judges, and human rights defenders who are harassed, threatened, and persecuted in the exercise of their professions. For years now, UIA-IROL has consistently expressed its concern for our Chinese colleagues. We have repeatedly invoked the UN Basic Principles on the role of lawyers, all of which have been and continue to be violated by the Chinese government through its systematic, and unrelenting persecution of lawyers and judges. UIA-IROL has stood up to support and defend our legal colleagues, whether in the form of individual or joint public statements, letters to government officials, disseminating information among its members, and participating alone or jointly with other organizations, some of which are present here today, in events and initiatives designed to raise awareness about the plight of both individual and groups of lawyers, judges, and human rights defenders in China. Among the very disturbing situations we have been made aware with respect to which we regularly act, location against lawyers invoked based on the trumped up charges of national security violations, subversion of state, causing a disturbance, as we have seen and heard on these numerous videos. This is simply a pretext for the Chinese government to allow detainers to mistreat and torture detainees. And we have seen and heard today from many lawyers who have endured such detention. And even when released, as we have seen and heard, lawyers are no longer free. They remain closely monitored and in some cases isolated from their friends and relatives seeking medical treatment, and they are forbidden to leave China to reunite with their families. We have seen repeatedly generalized denial of access to justice and the right to fair trial, including access to lawyers of their own choosing. Many times, lawyers, as we know, are not allowed to choose their own lawyers. They are given a lawyer appointed by the state, who clearly independent and are not acting in the best interest of their clients. The lawyers who choose to represent other lawyers have themselves faced increasing pressure to withdraw from representing their clients, and as we have seen, including suspension or revocation of their license to practice law. There are smear campaigns orchestrated by the official media, accusing lawyers and activists of being part of a criminal enterprise or disturbing the public order. Subjection to forced and falsified confessions broadcasted on Chinese television is unfortunately nothing new and increasingly frequent. Of great concern is the increasing misuse and improper application and manipulation of the system of granting and renewing professional licenses against those lawyers who are involved in the defense of human rights and in sensitive cases, aimed at controlling and monitoring lawyers and used as a means of exerting pressure. Some of the lawyers subjected to this arbitrary measure were represented those affected by the 709 crackdown. The list of lawyers against whom these abuses are committed, as we have seen, is heartbreakingly long and over many, many years. And we see now the same thing happening to those who work in Hong Kong with the imposition by China of its draconian national security law. UIA-IROL has been and continues to be adamant that no lawyer should suffer prosecution or persecution, including disciplinary measures for any legitimate activity undertaking the performance of his or her professional duties, detention and torture is a violation of the fundamental principles protecting the functions of a lawyer and cannot be allowed. One of the most egregious and heartbreaking for me are the measures of intimidation and harassment imposed on parents, children, parents, and other family members of lawyers, first of what a lawyer in danger must face. There just is no place in a civilized world for any type of pressure, harassment, or mistreatment of family members, including children or elderly parents, whose only crime is to be part of a family where one member happens to be a lawyer. Therefore, at this moment, I would like to take a moment to express our support and solidarity to all of the family members, too numerous to catalog, who even in the face of such threats and attacks demonstrate unparalleled courage, resilience, and tireless advocacy in the pursuit of justice for their loved ones. The People's Republic of China is a member of the UN Human Rights Council. As such, it is expected to uphold the highest standards in the promotion and protection of human rights that are, I insist, universal and inalienable, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. Therefore, the PRC's actions must reflect its international responsibilities and commitments regarding human rights. Yet, as we are all aware, time and again, the Chinese government willfully, consistently, and with impunity flouts their human rights obligations, instead attacking those who dare to call out China's abysmal human rights record. In closing, I refer us to the basic principles on the role of lawyers celebrating its 30th year, which remind us that free and independent lawyers are essential to uphold rights. And here I want to emphasize one very important point. Protection of lawyers is not just vital to lawyers and their professions, as some people assert. Instead, protection of lawyers is vital to the protection of the rights of all citizens. Without lawyers to defend rights and judges to uphold those rights, there can be no rights for citizens. Thus, until all our Chinese colleagues can perform their professional functions independently and without reprisal, we, the intermediate, up and stand with our brave colleagues in defense of the rule of law and the independence of our profession. And I agree wholeheartedly with the remarks of Professors Cohen and Halliday. Someday this too shall be history, and there shall be an accounting. We cannot be discouraged or cowed by the unspeakable situation that we know exists in China today. We must continue to strive to make progress one day at a time, one person at a time. If we can help one person in one way, even in a small way, we will be one step closer to a free society in China for our lawyers. And it is our job, we in the international and free world, on behalf of those whose voices are silenced, to shout from the rooftops our efforts and to maintain our support and solidarity, seeking justice, and freedom for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Even with a little bit of problem, we made through your hurricane. Our next speaker, Bo-Hsiang, is a Taiwanese lawyer specializing in constitutional law as well as the civil, criminal, and administrative law. He has written widely on skills and ethics of law practitioners. He's been a strong supporter of human rights lawyers in mainland China and interacted with many of them in person. He is currently the chairman of the 29th Taipei Bar Association. Please proceed. 尤律师，请。
好，谢谢主持人，也谢谢大家在这个时间还愿意聆听。我很荣幸，也很高兴，在这感人的时刻，能够在这个论坛上面为我的中国同行，为这么多的维权律师致敬，并且打气。希望我今天的发言能够给这些坚毅、勇敢的中国同行带来一点鼓舞的作用。如我们所熟知的，任何有效的统治都必须要透过被统治者的自愿服从来遂行。即使是最邪恶的暴政，如果没有受制者的自愿服从，它也绝不可能仅凭赤裸裸的暴力就可长可久。具体来讲，军警这些武力的投射范围有时而穷，也许能够维持街头秩序于一时，但是在武力射程以外的地方，被统治者既然没有表现出口服的必要，那么不服之心就会化成行动，于是统治就会失灵。枪杆子可以出政权，但是如果紧抓着枪杆子，那么绝非政权可长可久之计。因此，任何想要行之久远的政权，都必须要披上合法性的外衣，来获取被治者的认可。暴政的暴，往往不在于滥用暴力，或者是轻易诉诸暴力，而在于作为统治工具的法令，它的内容还有具体适用上的非正义。一旦被统治者看穿法令内容的非正义，或者是具体适用上的非正义，那么统治者就会褪下合法性的外衣，而不再获得被统治者的认可，进而他的统治也就丧失了正当性的基础。作为独立于政府的民间法律专家，为了要恪尽维护当事人权益的天职，律师能够揭发，也必须要揭发法令内容跟具体适用上的非正义。威权独裁政权深恐律师以文乱法，从根本去动摇他统治的合法性跟正当性。律师因此永远是威权独裁政府最危险的敌人。从古到今，不管是在东方或者是西方，不管是左翼还是右翼的威权独裁政府，都必然要破坏律师，一定要使律师对国家摇尾乞怜，作为他们专制权势的见证，威权专制才能够安稳好眠。就此来讲，律师其实是高风险的行业，而且国家越是专制，律师想要尽责他所需冒的风险就越高。联合国关于律师作用的基本原则的第16条规定，各国政府要确保律师能够履行他的所有职责，而不受到恫吓、妨碍或者是不适当的干涉，不会因为他按照公认的专业职责、准则跟道德规范采取任何行动而受到或者是威胁会受到起诉、经济或者是其他的制裁。同一个原则的第20条也规定，律师就他在书面或者是口头辩护时所发表的言论，或者因为履行职务在法院、法庭或其他行政当局前面所发表的言论，都应该享有民事或者是刑事的豁免权。以上的规定其实明确地反映了，像在中国这样的专制甚至集权的地区，律师确实有因为尽其职责而触怒，进而遭到威权当局报复的危险，而且这往往是事实。然而，律师这个行业以维护当事人权益跟捍卫民主法治作为我们的天职，对人权、民主还有法治有着根深蒂固的信仰跟热爱。 即使在中国这样的集权暴政国度里头，仍必然有律师不畏迫害，誓言为人权争取民主跟法治，甚至不惜舍身来成就这个事业。在中国，这些不畏关押、酷刑跟定罪、前仆后继、屡扑屡起的同业身上，我不仅看到了勇气跟人性的光辉，我更看到律师职业的桂冠。这样的勇气跟热情，我在林义雄、姚嘉文，还有其他曾经为台湾争取民主，在台湾的威权统治时期挺身而出，并且付出代价的台湾律师前辈身上也看到过。我总是深挚感谢他们，因为他们的付出跟余荫，使我在律师职业起步的开始就能够无所顾忌，为捍卫当事人的权益跟公共利益，在政府面前挺直腰杆，不忧不惧，而且一路走来始终如一。如今这许多的中国同行不惜放弃他们原本的前程、和乐的家庭跟亲情，牺牲自己的人身自由跟生命，只为了能够顶天立地，无愧他们律师职业的本分跟职责。他们的舍身正如从高山岩石缝中长出来，挺立在寒风中的美丽花朵，让中国人看见，面对共产党的集权暴政，除了服从之外，始终还有抵抗跟不合作这个选项。这个选项的被看见、被选择，一定会逐步动摇共产党的有效统治。它的意义正如同林义雄、姚嘉文这些律师前辈在台湾的牺牲，滋养灌溉了台湾民主跟自由，也一定功不唐捐，最后终会使中国这块古老的土地开出自由跟民主的花朵。希望这一天早日到来。谢谢。
感谢尤律师的讲话，非常好。Thank you, Ms. Yu. Our next speaker, Dr. Miles Yu, is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. Until recently, he served as the principal China policy advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. In that capacity, he advised the Secretary on all China-related issues. He's also professor of East Asia and military and naval history at the United States Naval Academy. Dr. Yu, please.
Thank you, Yaxue, and other organizers for inviting me to take part in this moving and deeply meaningful event in support of China's human rights lawyers. I'm extremely honored to be here with you, sharing my thoughts on China's lawyers and China's future. As requested, I shall speak in Chinese. 谢谢雅学邀请我参加这场活动，为中国的人权律师发声。那么我今天想给大家讲的是这个中国的律师与中国的未来。大家知道，6年前的今天，又一波红色恐怖在中国大陆展开，由中共专政机关一手执行的709维权律师全国大抓捕事件，在中共肮脏的执政记录上添上了不耻的又一页。那么在一个正常的社会里，律师是一个崇高的职业，因为律师的终极使命是保障法律的公正的执行和个人权利不得受到国家权力的侵害。中国共产党垄断了国家的权利，用这种无限的权利来无限制的侵害中国公民的权利。在毛泽东时代，这种侵权是不需要掩盖的。在所谓改革开放时期，中共的无产阶级专政需要法律来做幌子，不是真正的依法治国，而是依法整人，是依照共产党的法律来巩固共产党对权力的垄断。而对这个法律的幌子，最实质性的挑战，就是像高志胜、王宇、王全璋、任全牛、周世峰这样的勇敢正直的中国维权律师。对中国维权律师的抓捕，还反映出中国社会经久不衰，在共产党统治下达到炉火纯青地步的株连制 株连，也就是我们常说的 guilt by association， 是现代法治社会最佳反对的司法原理。中共在2015年709大抓捕的过程中大搞株连，不仅抓捕了律师的本人，还对他们的家属、同事、朋友，包括幼年儿童实施绑架、销声、强迫失踪。现代法治社会一个重要基石是绝对坚持正当的法律程序，也就是我们经常讲的 due process of law。没有这个坚持，法律就非法。共产党对法律的践踏，除了其虚伪，更重要的是对法律程序的蔑视。其具体实施纲领就是从严从快的专政哲学。从严从快就是不讲司法程序，一切以专政目标为准，搞疾风暴雨般的抓捕。在2015年7月9号那一天，中共在23个省市中迅速抓捕和扣押了200多名维权律师及其同事和亲属。就像当年纳粹德国在1938年11月9号那一天迅猛地扫荡犹太人的住宅和商店一样。大家知道，在1938年10月9号那一天，纳粹党徒对犹太人实施突然袭击，造成了所谓的 Crystal Night， 所谓的 The Night of the Broken Glass， 也就是大碎玻璃之夜。那么中共79律师大抓捕跟这项活动不谋而合，实在是无法无天。我们今天聚在一起，不仅仅是声援被无辜抓捕的中国维权律师及其同事和家属，更重要的是要告知世人，未来自由民主的中国必须要让国家服务于人民，政府的权力必须受到法律的限制和约束。任何违背法律精神的政府行为，如株连、蔑视程序、法外拘押等等，都必须废除。而让这些司法理念成为现实的最关键的一群人，就是中国的律师。他们战斗在反对政府越权的，他们战斗在反对政府越权的前线，是保障天赋人权的必要杠杆和顶梁柱。一个没有能够自由行使职业权利的律师的国度，必定是一个专制的国度。从这个意义上来讲，709律师的遭遇和他们的未来命运，和自由民主中国的未来前途息息相关。他们的自由是中国人民摆脱奴役，成为真正自己国家的主人的必要保障和前提。谢谢大家。
谢谢余茂春博士，你这篇讲话还真的是非常适合放在这个 panel 的最后一个总结性的。Thank you, Mr. Yu. Thanks to all of our distinguished speakers in the room for your encouraging and thought-provoking and forceful and hopeful messages. We received a few short messages of solidarity with the at-risk for supporting at-risk lawyers in China from organizations in Asia, Europe, and Canada. We're very happy to see such a convergent support from the international community of lawyers. We will play their messages now, very brief.
こんにちは。日本の東京からご挨拶します。私は阿古智子です。大家好，我是日本东京大学的阿古。今天我代表日本东京的人权组织 Human Rights Now 说几句话。今天我们能够参加这个中国律师节的活动，非常高兴。Human Rights Now 是一个日本的律师为主的组织，我这样的大学老师也参与的。 主要的活动有培训班，还有教育项目，还有各个方面的诉讼的个案研究，做比较研究等等。こんにちは。日本の東京からご挨拶します。私は阿古智子です。大家好，我是日本东京大学的阿古。今天我代表日本东京的人权组织 Human Rights Now 说几句话。今天我们能够参加这个中国律师节的活动，非常高兴。Human Rights Now 是一个日本的律师为主的组织，我这样的大学老师也参与的。主要的活动有培训班，还有教育项目，还有各个方面的诉讼的个案研究，做比较研究等等。我们过去也做过一些中国维权方面的项目。本来今年也准备做一个针对中国维权律师的培训班，我们已经申请到了一批资金，但是因为疫情还比较严重，所以没能实现，非常遗憾。以后正常的交流恢复了之后，我们非常愿意邀请中国的律师来日本参加我们的培训班。你们来了之后，我们日本的律师很想跟你们中国的律师做一些共同研究，也可以做教育项目。我们非常盼望着以后也继续跟中国维权律师中国方面的组织以及活动，非常感谢。
I'm Stuart Russell, co-chair of the Monitoring Committee on Attacks on Lawyers at the International Association of People's Lawyers. We extend to our colleagues in China our total support and solidarity, and we wish you the best on this anniversary of the Chinese Human Rights Lawyers Festival and the anniversary of the 709 crackdown. Ever since our monitoring committee was founded 6.5 years ago, we have consistently reported on attacks against Chinese human rights lawyers through Facebook, Twitter, and particularly through our multilingual blog about attacks on lawyers. We are impressed and inspired by the acts and activities of our colleagues in China and their supporters in Hong Kong and around the world. And we wish them the very best. We call upon the Chinese authorities to stop the persecution of Chinese human rights lawyers, and we demand that the persecution end immediately. Strong support for our colleagues in China. Hurrah!
안녕하십니까. 대한민국의 진보적 변호사 단체인 민주사회를 위한 변호사 모임입니다. 민변은 기본적 인권의 옹호와 민주주의의 발전에 기여함을 그 목적으로 하여 권위주의에 저항하는 사람을 보호하고 인권 상황을 개선하고자 1988년 출범하였습니다.
우리는 모든 사람의 기본적 권리와 자유가 진정으로 보장되어야 하며 특히 이를 위해 활동하는 변호사 활동가를 포함한 인권 옹호자들의 안전과 권리가 확보되어야 더 나은 세상을 만들어갈 수 있다고 믿습니다.
중국 외에서 공익과 인권을 위해 싸우는 변호사님들에게 연대의 메시지를 보냅니다.
변호사 탄압을
중단하라! 변호사 탄압을 중단하라!
변호사 탄압을 중단하라!
인권 변호사와 연대합니다.
연대합니다. 연대합니다.
연대합니다.
연대합니다.
Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada stands with human rights lawyers in China. End all harassment against them. no professional independence and protection for lawyers, then no human rights and no rule of law. 加拿大律师权益观察与中国人权律师要求停止所有的骚扰，律师没有独立性，得不到保护，就没有人权，没有法治。
We move on to the brief ceremony for the China Human Rights Lawyer Award. We ask Mr. Zhou Fengsuo, the president of Humanitarian China, to announce this year's award to 2 human rights lawyers. Mr. Zhou, please proceed.
Thank you. Honorable guests and lawyers, it's my honor here today to present these awards as one of the hosts of Humanitarian China. We live to fight is our obligation. This is a striking line noted in 2013 South Korean movie, The Attorney. The movie describes how the change of a lawyer inspires the awakening of those who are around him and that of a whole nation. The struggles of the lawyers in the movie seems to be the portrayal of the human rights lawyers in China today. It is about bitterness and suffering, but it also stands for courage and perseverance. Today, we are here to present China Human Rights Lawyer Award, the purpose of which is to pay tribute to the lawyers in China who are striving with their heart and soul for the betterment of human rights and the role of law protection in the country by performing diligently their duties as lawyers, by upholding the principles of justice, even risking incarceration and arrests. After extensive nomination process and the discussion among organizers, we have come up with the following 2 awardees for 2021, lawyer Chen Weiping and lawyer Ding Jiaxi. With the award, we wish to salute the 2 lawyers now in custody and to convey to their families our solidarity and warm support. At the same time, we want to call on the international community to continue speaking up and expressing concern on their cases. We must pass on to Chinese Communist government a very clear message that as a member of the international community, it cannot evade its state obligations of heeding to and implementing the internationally recognized and endorsed standards of human rights and rule of law. Chang Weiping, born in 1984 in Baoji, Shanxi, is among the most active member of the younger generation of human rights lawyers in China. He obtained his lawyer's license in 2011. Thereafter, he took up multiple sensitive cases concerning human rights, religious rights, land rights, death penalty, arbitrary arrests and detention, power abuses, and unjust criminal procedures. He was also vocal in speaking up for fellow lawyers who were suppressed. His work made him the government's target of persecution. Weiping has also served as a pro bono lawyer for NGOs assisting cases against discrimination and providing legal consultation to the socially disadvantaged communities, including victims of contaminated vaccines, women, and sexual minorities. Weiping had his license cancelled by the authorities in 2019. On October 22, 2020, he was taken away by the local police from his own native town, where he had been under house arrest for nearly 10 months, allegedly for inciting subversion of state power. His latest arrest was suspected to be the result of his disclosure to the public of his experience of being tortured earlier that year. So far, Wei Ping has remained incommunicado. He has not been allowed to see his lawyer or family. Nothing is known about his physical and psychological status of being. Ding Jiaxi, born 1967 in Yichang, Hubei, Jiaxi obtained his lawyer's license in 1994. Around 2010, he began to actively take part in the New Citizens movement organized by NGO in Beijing called Gongmeng. The movement advocated for equal education rights for children of migrant workers in China, and for the government officials to declare their wealth and assets. As a result, Jiaxi was accused in 2013 of taking quarrels and provoking troubles, and assembling a crowd to disrupt social order. He was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison and was released in October 2016. On December 26, 2019, Ding Jiaxi was again arrested, allegedly in relation to the Xiamen gathering. He was accused of subverting state power and was held incommunicado till January 2021. He has been allowed to meet his lawyer online, only online. News has broken that Jiaxi suffered torture during his recent detention, including fatigue interrogation, which constrained posture on the tiger chair, solitary confinement, and the deprivation of food and sleep, and around-the-clock bombardment of Xi Jinping's propaganda on amplifier non-stop for 10 consecutive days. May we now warmly welcome Mrs. Chen Zijuan, wife of Chang Weiping, and Ms. Luo Shengchun, wife of Ding Jiaxi, to join us in accepting the 2021 China Human Rights Lawyers Award on behalf of the two lawyers. First, Ms. Chen, please.
女士们、先生们，很荣幸我和孩子代表他接受2021年人权律师奖。
大家好，我叫长城美瑞，我是常伟平的儿子。今天我终于知道了，我爸爸是在别人眼中的一位英雄。恭喜他获得人权律师奖。Hooray！
我想这个奖是对正处于高墙电网中的他一个巨大的肯定，也是对我们家属一个巨大的鼓舞。希望大家继续关注人权捍卫者。
丁家喜获得今年的中国人权律师奖，非常感谢中国的律师同仁，感谢709律师节各主办方对丁家喜的支持、认可和鼓励，感谢大家对饱受酷刑的家喜对我们全家人的支持和鼓励。中国人权律师一日无自由，中国便一日无人权。争取中国人权和自由，前路艰险而漫长。我们感恩所有同行的朋友，让我们继续携手，一起努力，挑战集权和专制。自由、公义和爱必胜。谢谢大家。
Thank you for the inspiring speech. That's why we have this event. In this severe political environment, it might be difficult for an egg to rival the high solid wall of stone of power. But if we look in history, dictatorship never lasts long, as it could never survive the scrutiny and the resistance of the people. I believe every single endeavor we have made and are making will embark on the path to change. As noted in the movie Attorney, the stone will eventually turn into sand, but a broken egg can nurture life. Let us stay united and resolute. Now we would like to invite the audience to watch 2 short video clips with us. First one was recorded by lawyer Chang Weiping soon before he was arrested. The second one by the daughter of lawyer Ding Jiaxi.
我被锁在宝泰宾馆招待所，我被房间里面的老虎凳上，每天24小时10天的时间。这是一种极端的酷刑。我们这些人的所做的这些事儿，包括我自2013年以来，虽然我自己很惭愧，但是被别人称之为所谓人权律师做的这些工作，虽然都是点滴的微小的事情，但是自豪的来讲，我认为我们是在推动这个社会的进步。如果我们不是被奖励的话，也不应当被如此对待。
Hey Dad, I hope you are doing okay, even though I know you're in a very rough place right now, but that's what I've admire of you always, because you are always, you find ways to bring joy, and like I've never seen you cry because you always find life so beautiful and you are willing to live it. And I want to tell you that sorry. I want to tell you that things have been going really well, and I found a really good group of friends at Tufts, and I really like what I study. I'm going to be an engineer just like you did in college. And my sister is doing really well too. She's going for her physics PhD and she's so brilliant. Mom is becoming an activist. She's taking nonviolent courses online and she's talking about it to people every day, and she's helping you, and we will not stop telling everyone your story. There will be a light at the end of the tunnel, and there will be a day when you are out and you can see a free China. It will not be easy. We know that because there's power, there's money involved. There are so many countries who wish to see that China could be a real democracy. It is a long road, but it will happen at some point, and you will be out and you will live to see it. So this is to my dad's comrade in arms. I just want to let you know that what you are doing is so important for this world. The world needs more people like you, people who can see through the madness of the Chinese government and not afraid to speak the truth. What you are doing is that you bring the ultimate truth to light, and the truth cannot be altered. It cannot be shattered or changed in any way. And the world needs to see this truth. Many parts of the world already know China's true colors, and they are taking action to stop it.
To the following individuals and organizations. Mr. Philip Austin. Professor Ako Tomoko. Professor Jerome A. Cohen. Mr. Bernard Favreau. Reverend Bob Fu. Mr. Hans Gaspik. Professor Terence Halliday. Mr. Patrick Henry. Mr. Albert Ho. Ms. Molly Holtzman. Professor Sida Liu. Mr. Jean-Jacques Martin. Professor Yves Pils. Professor Stuart Russell. Amnesty International Asia Pacific. Community to support Chinese lawyers. Council of Bars and the Law Societies of Europe. Foundation on the Day of an Endangered Lawyer. Frontline Defenders. Human Rights Now. Human Rights Watch. Institute for Human Rights of European Lawyers. International Association of People's Lawyers. International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute. International Service for Human Rights. Lawyers for Lawyers. Lawyers' Rights Watch, Canada. Safeguard Defenders. International Association of Lawyers. UN Human Rights Experts of the Treaty Bodies and the Special Procedures. with a little overtime. Thank you for your patience. We have come to the conclusion of the 5th China Human Rights Lawyers' Day. On behalf of the organizers, I thank every speaker for taking the time to participate in this important event. And I thank all of the people in our audience on YouTube live streaming for joining us. I also want to thank the team and the volunteers who worked the long hours and on holidays to make this event a success. Thank you all. This event, as I said before, is only the beginning of a renewed, expanded, and strengthened effort to counter the attacks on human rights lawyers in China, to find new and effective ways to support this at-risk group who has endured so much for a very large cause, a cause that concerns all of us. Let's keep in touch and continue our work. In the end, before we leave, we want to show a coda. It's a compilation of 5 minutes of photos from all around the world over the last few years. So if you would like to stay a few minutes more, that's nice. And good day and good night.